Everyone, thanks again for tuning in. I'm Jeff Jarman, President of the Faculty Senate, joined by Julie Scott and Matt Houston, the presidents of the UP and USS Senates. And we're grateful for Rick Muma, the provost, and Terry Hall, the vice president for student affairs, who've joined us today to answer some questions. Thank you both for being here. Unlike our former events, we have a little more of kind of an agenda for today. So we're going to start with some questions related to return to campus, transition into questions about fall classes. But as always, please type your questions into the chat box, and we'll get those asked for everyone. But I think today Julie has first question.
Yeah, the first question, Rick, we're going to toss it over to you, but as some of us employees plan to prepare to return to work on Tuesday, if you can give us no other advice, what are your top recommendations for us as we plan to return?
Okay, thank you, Julie. Welcome, everyone. Good to be here with you all today, and you may be looking forward to the 3-day weekend like I am. We want to make sure that you get some downtime before we come back to the university or begin to open our university on the 26th. So my number one recommendation is to make sure you go to wichita.edu/COVID-19 news. That's our main website where we're communicating all that information. But also another website, which is also linked to the COVID-19 website, which is the wichita.edu/ShockersUnited, which actually has the detailed information about how we're opening up the campus. I think the main thing I want to leave with everybody, and if Colton could bring up the slide on the health and wellness today, and WSU Today was communicated some information about what everybody needs to know about coming back to campus. And you see there's 6 things here, but I'll start with everybody needs to make sure that they perform a daily personal wellness check before coming to campus, and to not come to campus if you feel ill in any way. If you have a fever, if you have a cough, or anything that you can't really explain, don't come to campus. Contact your healthcare provider to see if that's anything that you need to check into. And then also contact your supervisor to make sure that they understand that you're not feeling well. It was common in the past, pre-COVID, that, we all showed up when we had a cold or some sort of upper respiratory infection. And just because it can be confused with possible signs and symptoms of COVID, we need to make sure that you check out with your healthcare provider before you come to campus. So if you can put that graphic back up again, Colton. We're also asking everybody to practice social distancing while on campus. So that means staying 6 feet separated from everyone. Basically, respecting everybody's boundaries, not because we're trying to be rude or anything. It is kind of an odd thing that when we're trying to stay away from people, when we're spent all of our careers trying to make sure people are congregating together, but this is something that is important, and we know from the literature and all the research that's been done that social distancing does make a difference, particularly when you're trying to prevent viral spread. And that also includes wearing a face covering at all times. When you're alone in your office, you can take that off. Or if you're walking outside and you're alone, you don't have to wear a face covering. But by and large, we're going to be expecting everybody to wear face coverings, including me, and I know that's a difficult change in everybody's behavior. It's going to take a while to get used to. I'm not quite used to it, but it's something that we also know, along with social distancing, physical distancing from one another, wearing a face covering also slows the spread of the virus. If you're in a certain area on campus where you're expected to wear more protective equipment, make sure that you check with your department and what that might mean. I think most people probably have a pretty good idea of what that is, depending on where you work. We're asking that you wash your hands when you arrive and when you leave campus, and really anytime you leave your workspace, when you're out and about, good idea, just go back and wash your hands before you go back to your desk. And then disinfect your workspace on a regular basis, particularly if you're in a high traffic area or if you're around various different people who might be in your office or in your location. You can flip to the other side of that graphic, Colton. There's some other information. I'm not going to go through all of this, but please download this from the website. There's some other information that you might find helpful, more detailed information about COVID-19. Also, information on the right-hand side of that, when you have visitors coming to campus, make sure that you plan ahead. Make sure you notify folks that when you are going to have visitors, and then limit the visitors on campus. And, we're still in a very slowly opening of campus, and so we're really trying to limit as many people as possible. Every office should have by this time a COVID-19 safety starter kit, which includes various information for you, as well as a mask for your office staff and cleaning supplies. So that's further described there as well. We also have created some signage on campus, and I believe Colton can provide that information to you. Some simple signage that you can post in your offices. And you can either post them as they are here, or you can post individual signage like the social distance one or the wear your mask signage. These will be posted around campus, but we'll also encourage you to have these in your office as well. And then the final thing I would say, and this is the website that Colton has up there where you can go and download those both in color format and black and white, and customize that. There's also some signage there, I believe, on office hours. If it's not on that page, there's another page as well. Yeah, there they are, where you can have your information posted outside of the office. And also, if you're in your office, and some offices are going to maintain their offices to be locked, even when they might be in there, then make sure people knock on the door. The final thing I recommending or really strongly encouraging is to everybody to go through the employee training before you come back to campus next week. It has a lot of different scenarios, questions that people have, and some answers to those. So strongly encourage you to do that as well. So those are the main things, Julie, that I recommend that people do before next week.
Thanks for that, Rick. To your point about people maybe feeling uncomfortable about wearing the mask, I was actually on campus yesterday, met somebody who was doing some service work in the building. We both had our masks on, and it was easy to do. And when everyone is doing it, I think whatever difficulty people might have, that goes down a lot really quickly.
Yeah.
There is a question in the chat about wearing masks, about whether faculty are expected to wear face masks while they're teaching.
So there's been some conversation about that. If there's a situation, I believe it's where we landed, and Jeff, you're on that committee, so you might want to chime in if I don't say anything right. There are some areas on campus, large lecture halls, where it's obvious that there's ample space between the faculty member and the students where it's possible. Most cases, that's not possible. There are some, I believe, Jeff, and you can verify this, some conversations about creating some portable barriers that can be moved around the classroom, where a faculty member could be behind that barrier, a plexiglass barrier, and not have their mask on while they're teaching. So those are the kind of things that we're working on to get ready for the fall in cases where we have face-to-face. And Jeff, you might want to add anything that I may have missed with that.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think that in general, for most people, they're going to be in a classroom where they're going to be closer and should expect to have a mask on. I think if there are going to be some specific cases where maybe some plexiglass might get used, but for most people, if you're going to be close, you're going to need to wear a mask. We're talking about wearing masks to try to limit the spread, but of course there's a risk, maybe that something happens. I think Matt's got our next question about.
Yeah. What would be the university's protocol if there was a positive case found on the campus?
So, good question, Matt. And I'm hoping that's not going to be the case, but we have to be prepared for it. And I'd say the first thing I'd say about this is that I want to let you know that Camille Childers, who is our Director of Student Health, is the single point of contact to manage all of those. And she will be coordinating all kinds of activities that need to go in place with that. We are going to have some spaces to quarantine students on campus, and in a minute, Terry can talk more about that. But the main thing is that we will make sure that this is addressed, and we will have to go through some protocols on our own with the local health department to guide us on how that will be managed. And any more detailed conversations about that, if anybody has that, Camille, I just talked to her earlier this morning, would be happy to have more conversations about exactly what would happen and how long and that sort of thing. But since I brought up how long, it'll be a 14-day period, we do know that, but there may be some other nuances that would need to come into play. Terry, would you like to add anything in terms of what you all are doing in terms of planning for space in the housing area?
Sure, certainly, I'd be happy to. Good morning, everyone. So our hope for the fall is that we're going to come back pretty much at occupancy. We're not going to probably have any triples this year, but we're going to probably come back with about 1,400 students on campus. We'll save one floor in one of our halls for quarantine and isolating students should we have to. But you know, our goal is to come back and have a full residence life experience for students. One of the things that we're fortunate about, it's fortunate for us here at Wichita State, is we don't have the more old-fashioned one bathroom per hall or per floor scenario on our campus. So our rooms are all suites, which limits the number of students who access any single sink or toilet. So in most of our areas we'll probably have 2 people per sink, up to 4 for a restroom or a toilet, but it's a good ratio of person to hygiene areas.
So Terry, could you comment on the number of rooms you all are holding back in case there is a need to quarantine?
Scott Jensen has informed me that we're holding off one of the floors, which I assume would probably be in Shocker Hall, as a space that we would not fill one wing, but one floor of one of the wings.
Okay.
Julia,
20-ish, I think.
Julia,
Yeah.
any follow-up there?
Yeah, Terry, kind of a follow-up as far as the residence hall capacity. Are you planning to make any changes regarding room assignments or how many students per room, anything like that?
You know, beyond what I said, Julie, you know what, we don't expect having any triples this year because we don't want to have too much density. You know, the truth is, with residence halls, it's going to be really hard to ask students to social distance and to self-isolate. And so, you know, while some campuses are looking to just do 1 person per room, most of the other schools here in Kansas are doing what we're doing by taking advantage of the suite setups that we have and limiting the number of students per restroom or toilet and sink. We're also looking at what does this mean in terms of activities for students. You know, we do sorority recruitment before school starts, and what will that look like? And we've gone through the Radigan Student Center, and we know what social distancing is within all of our rooms, and how that changes our capacity here in this building. We're hoping we can use the fall to our advantage and maybe have some of the events outdoors so we can social distance and still have some of those larger crowds.
And I just wanted to say, so we're talking primarily about students and whether there's a student who is positive, but we haven't mentioned about employees. Camille would still be the main point of contact to manage that. But for employees, it'll obviously be different. They'd be working with their own healthcare provider and the local health department directly on what they would need to do in terms of quarantining. We wouldn't be quarantining employees on campus.
Thanks for all that. I think Matt maybe has a follow-up related to events this fall.
Yeah, as we gear up for the fall, there are often many events that take place. What is the university planning for fall events? Like the typical faculty staff kickoff, convocation, employee recognition, etc., due to the COVID-19.
So I'll talk in sort of generalities, and I'll let Terry talk about some more specific things in terms of student affairs. But we do have a group on campus. It's called the Collaboration Team, which is led by folks in StratCom. Carmen Hike in particular would be the point person about this. But it really depends on what the state does in terms of phased reopening. We're going to be going by those guidelines. We're not telling anybody to cancel any of their activities, but to think and plan those activities with in mind these various different limitations to crowd size. The reality is, even if we have a fully phased in approach at the state and local level, there's still going to be social distancing requirements that will come into play. So that's going to automatically limit size. But it doesn't mean that we have to cancel activities. We just have to plan them a little bit differently. They might be smaller. There might be a mix of meetings like this or in a Zoom format. But if you have any specific questions, Carmen Hite in StratCom can answer those. And she's also putting together sort of a tip sheet to give some more guidance to people who are thinking about planning for events in the fall. And so, Terry, you probably have some more information about how you might be dealing with student activities.
Sure. One example, Matt, that I want to offer is our move-in for the start of the fall semester. And that's an event that we all look forward to on campus. Many of us volunteer to help out. Parents and their children line up and they check in at Coke and then they go to the various residence halls. And so one of the things that might be different is that move-in takes place over a period of many more days, where we actually schedule the appointments of students when they and their families will be here so that we can limit the crowds at that point. We probably won't have all the volunteers helping as we have in the past, but it's that kind of thinking. It's about how do we do what we normally do in a way that's safe, but still makes sure that students have a great experience throughout the process.
There's a question in the chat about freshman orientation, and a great answer from Kim Sandlin if people haven't seen that already. The question is about orientation and that it would happen in phases. A virtual event, online modules, followed by in-person in August following guidelines. Anything else? Oh, there we have the answer up on the screen too.
Yeah, Kim is all over this. Kim Sandlin, who's the director of the Office of Student Success, and Shrika Fisher, who's the director of Transition and Orientation Programs, have started already, actually, at the very beginning of the situation that we're in right now with COVID, of moving most things to a virtual format. And then, as you just mentioned, Jeff, other kinds of activities, particularly as they get closer to the beginning of the semester.
Provost Muma, I think it's Dr. Shrika Fisher at this point in time. I think she completed her doctorate and graduated this past weekend. So I want to give a shout out to the new doctor among us.
Sorry, Shrika.
Congratulations. Why don't we, some questions in the chat about the fall semester. So we'll transition to some teaching things related to fall. First question that's in the chat, I think, is one that's on a lot of people's minds, has to do with any potential changes to the calendar for the fall. The question in the chat was, could we start earlier and end earlier? So where are we on any potential changes?
So right now, there's no plans on starting earlier. I believe the start date is the 17th of August. Does that sound right? Our colleagues on this, yeah. We are going to have some conversation next week with various folks who play a role in academic calendar, class scheduling, faculty senate president, to discuss about fall break and the Thanksgiving break. The way we have actually communicated to faculty is that we're requiring all face-to-face classes to move to a hybrid format. It may not be necessary to stop the semester in Thanksgiving. An option could be that to communicate to faculty that at the point of Thanksgiving, the students won't be coming back. So whatever needs to be finished in the classes needs to be done in an online or remote fashion, including their final exams. We haven't decided that yet. We do know the issue when we give breaks to students, if they travel home, particularly back to a state that has a lot more cases, one that's on the watch list that requires a 14-day quarantine if they came back to Kansas, creates some problems. So we need to have this conversation with all the different groups of people who are involved in this. And we plan to do that next week and provide some more communication back to campus.
Talking about what classes are going to be like, I know there's an issue for faculty and also for students to try to understand what their classes are going to look like. There's a survey out for faculty to complete right now to help in that process. Anything either you or Terry want to say about that?
Well, I'll just say that faculty had just finished the semester, so they're in the process of responding to that survey. Several faculty have done that already. But if you want to, this is for students who may be listening. If you go to wichita.edu/fall2020 is a website where faculty have indicated what their plans are going to be for the fall. We'll continue to encourage faculty to update that and encourage students to look at that so they can make plans accordingly. And if they find out that all of their classes are going to be online, well, that may change what they might want to do in terms of coming back to campus or Wichita for those that are living out of state. But the reality is that it's going to be a little bit of a mix for all students. And so that most students probably will be required to come back to campus for some kinds of activities, either testing or some content that can't be delivered in a remote or online fashion. But anyway, my point is that the faculty are providing that information to us. We're encouraging them to do that as soon as possible so students can make their decisions on what they want to do for the fall semester.
Yeah, I guess I just echo that I think it's important as soon as faculty know what they're doing to fill out that form. It's pretty helpful for students to see how much will be online, how much will be in person, so they can figure out what schedule works best for them.
And I just want to make the point about hybrid, and just so that everybody's clear on that, hybrid means lots of different things. It can mean face-to-face, it can mean online, it can mean modular, it can mean remote, it could, so by offering that flexibility for the faculty, they can pretty much offer their course in a number of different ways, including having students in some cases where social distancing is an issue in a classroom space that they need to teach in. They may be asking students, basically a third of them could meet face-to-face on Tuesday, a third would be face-to-face on Thursday, and a third would be doing something online or remote. So there's going to be all those kinds of differences too that the faculty will be communicating with students.
All right. Julie, I think, has a question about those classroom assignments.
Yeah, it sounds like David Wright, Gina Crabtree have been doing a lot of heavy lifting when it comes to looking at classroom assignments and things and how to use the larger lecture halls for maybe actually some of the smaller classes. Rick, can you kind of talk about that a little bit, about where we're at in the stage of planning for those processes?
Yeah, so let me just kind of back up a little bit from there and basically also give a shout out to Gina Crabtree and David Wright. Before I forget, they've been spending a lot of time coming up with the information that we're getting ready to communicate to faculty about that. But just so you know, all faculty were communicated last week about moving to a hybrid format for the fall. So faculty, if you have not looked at your email and you're listening to this, make sure you go to that email. There's a lot of information about how that's going to work, including how you can communicate what you're planning to do, which I mentioned already. We're also will be emailing today to faculty about the classroom capacity of the classrooms that they're currently assigned to, so they understand how many students can be in that room and what kinds of things that they need to consider in terms of social distancing, which may be a situation where a third of the class meets on Tuesday, a third meets on Thursday, and a third meets online or remotely to try to make sure there's enough distance from individuals. So that will be communicated. If it hasn't already gone out, it will go out before the end of the day, and the faculty will be able to see their classes and what the capacity is for their currently assigned classrooms.
The chat box is filling up, which is great. We're going to try to get these questions asked. In thinking about new instructional designs, Rick, what kind of resources, professional development is available for faculty to help with that transition?
Well, two things I want to talk about. One is a conference that's coming up, and it's scheduled 2 different times during the summer. And let me get to my notes here because I already had the folks from the Media Resources Center and the IDA office, and also give a shout out to John Jones and Carolyn Spear and their teams who have been working hours and hours and hours to provide support for our faculty and doing an excellent job with that. I can't say enough. But anyway, there's 2 conferences coming up, and these are the ones that will provide a lot of the assistance for faculty. One is on June 8th through the 12th, and another one is on August 10th through the 12th. And there's 60 training sessions in June over 5 days during that time frame that I mentioned. And evening virtual social events as well. So they'll be providing that opportunity. The trainings will be provided by the MRC, IDA office, ITS, library, and other campus entities who have a stake in helping design classroom experiences for students. And then there will be identified tracks of 7 different modules of hybrid classes to give faculty an idea of how they can do these kinds of things differently. The ones that's offered early in the summer or to support faculty, obviously we start planning early for their classes in the fall. There will be recorded in the ones that occur in June. So if faculty can't attend during that time, they can go back and look at that. And then the August program will be updated versions of many of the sessions that happen in June. But they're also open for faculty to reach out to them individually. They're very accommodating. They want to do whatever they can to help make this transition good, not only for the faculty, but also the students.
Yeah, I guess maybe is the important point to emphasize here is that we all know we had to react quickly to finish out the spring semester, but there are all these trainings available now to help us really upgrade the quality of classes in the fall.
And the emails that went out to the faculty last week and the ones today have links to their training. They have extensive websites of different kinds of things that faculty can learn about to make this transition.
Related to this, I guess there's a couple of specific questions about trainings. Any chance there's additional resources to help faculty who are going to look at external professional development related to this?
I think we would consider that on an individual basis, maybe the faculty working through their deans, and if they have resources available, that would probably be the first stop. But if there's other need for that, we'd be open to having those conversations.
All
And
right.
I'm assuming you mean for faculty who may be out of state or these particular trainings that we're offering aren't convenient for them and they have found something else that may be useful.
Yeah.
I don't want to rule out anything, so we can have those conversations.
Another really specific question in the chat, but one I think I know I've heard in lots of other venues has to do with software needs that students have, statistics software like SPSS, creative software like Adobe. Those companies gave some extensions this spring. Any news from you about resources or what we might do to help students with those needs?
Well, I think the first thing I'll say about that, there'll be some continuation of that. Of course, we'll be able to provide devices for students and hotspots for students where there's they don't have access to any of that equipment. We've already made some announcements about that already. But I guess what I would say that the faculty need to work with their departments and communicate that to their deans and try to resolve that in the college. I know that we had to do some of that for SPSS. So there will be other needs for that in the fall, and we'll just follow that same process. ITS is standing by also to take that information and help solve some of those problems for the faculty.
Any comments, Rick? There's a question earlier in the chat about in terms of instructional continuity, how teaching staff should plan for for an extended illness during the semester.
In terms of faculty expenditure?
Yeah, I think they mean like if any of us get sick, what we should do in terms of instructional continuity.
So that's not any different from what we would normally do if any of us become ill. And that happens every year. So working with the department chair and the dean and human resources, we'll the process that we have in place that would manage that already. And in those cases, departments have had to backfill. Other faculty have had to step up to the plate to help fill that content. It's just all very situational, but we'll do our best to try to accommodate whatever that is. And I'm assuming people believe or think that there's going to be an outbreak, or they're concerned that there's going to be an outbreak, and that's the reason why they're bringing this forward. And again, we're going to work through our students that we have when we have any illness, and we'll just have to deal with it as that issue comes about.
There's a new question about online classes. If a faculty member switches to fully online permanent, what fees are associated for a student in that case?
So I just want to make a couple of things clear. So all the traditional face-to-face courses that are currently scheduled for the fall, those are all being switched to hybrid, and there's not going to be an additional fee assessed. Any online course that has already been planned for to be offered in a fully online environment, strategically developed to be in a fully online environment, will continue to pay the online fee. Any faculty that does switch over to from hybrid to online, that fee will be assessed. Just in conversations I've had with the various folks who are working on these things, we're not really expecting a lot of faculty to switch over to online. We're not seeing that. There is a deadline that's communicated to the faculty in the communication that we sent last week, and that will go out today, that if there are faculty who are going to do that, they need to communicate that to the registrar. And I think it's January, late January.
June.
Yeah. Thanks, Jeff.
You got it.
Forward, I'm going way too far ahead of myself. Yeah, June, late June. I think it's the 26th, somewhere along those lines.
Yeah.
We can type that in the chat, and we can see that there.
Yeah, and that's if I understand correctly. So faculty understand.
I'm glad to be back, folks. We had a bit of a power surge here on campus, and it went dark in the RSC. I hear that the Shocker Hall lost its power. We're back up, though. Still no internet, so you get me on my phone instead.
Welcome back.
Yeah, thanks for coming back.
I missed you all so much.
Yeah.
Hey, Rick, to follow up on that, for the reason faculty need to put that request in early, as I understand it, is because the student fee bills get generated and a student would be alerted to that change. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. There's some other budget-related questions. Matt, you want to come back here?
Yes. Were there any more updates as far as July's budget that's coming up? Any outlooks as far as furloughs or any more budget cuts coming up?
So not anything majorly different from what President Golden communicated a couple of weeks ago. There are a few minor things. I mean, none of this is minor, I understand. We do know that some additional funding that was possibly going to be made available to all the state schools, and for us, it was around $1 million. That is not going to be available to us. We are planning for a 2% across the board cut for next fiscal year. That's not changing. We aren't planning any more furloughs or beyond the ones that we've announced, which includes the executive team, which is they're not taking a furlough, but the equivalent of a furlough, and the deans are taking a furlough. We're not asking anybody else to do any pay cuts or furloughs. And then our tuition increase is still on the table. We're still evaluating that from guidance from the Board of Regents and other state institutions. We're trying to coordinate that as well. We do have to submit what our plans are by June 1st to the Board of Regents, so that can be voted on at the June meeting. A decision still has not been made about how we'll be utilizing the second portion of the CARES Act, which is around 4.6 million, somewhere around there. We're still waiting on what any further guidance will be on that in terms of how we can use that. And then it would also be helpful for us to wait until after we have a clear understanding from the board and approval of our budget. So those are the main date updates. Not anything's changed. And I think Dr. Golden discussed most of those when we met 2 weeks ago.
So Rick, grades were due earlier this week and students are in the process of deciding about credit, no credit. Faculty and staff might be asked some questions about that. I fielded a couple in the last few days. I don't know if there's any reminder information about what to talk to students about as they decide that.
Well, I think, and it's not just faculty, it's advisors too. The students need to understand the full ramifications of what that might mean for them if they decide to take credit, no credit versus a letter grade, particularly for students who may be going on a graduate school or maybe some issues in certain accredited programs here at the university. So before a student, and hopefully students who've already made the decision, have already talked to faculty or advisors, they should do that. So the grades were due on the 19th. There was a form that was opened up for students on the 20th, and they have until the 26th, which is next Tuesday, to make a decision on whether they're going to take credit and no credit. We're not going to allow any students to make any changes after that.
Yeah, the original grade will be available for a student if they need it. Is that right?
So if they switch from the grade to no credit or credit, that's going to stand. They're not going to be able to change that back to the grade. But if a student applies to graduate school and they would like to know what that really meant, what was the letter grade behind that, the registrar would be able to communicate that information to them if that was needed. So yeah, that grade doesn't go away, but it won't show up in the student's transcript.
So another question we had in the chat was related to ProctorU and whether or not there were opportunities for some lower cost options or just alternatives for classes for the fall regarding ProctorU.
Well, we have Respondus Lockdown Browser that is another lower cost, meaning the university is paying for it. And people need to understand too that any other use of ProctorU, we have purchased some ability for faculty to utilize that, and that cost is not being passed on to the students. The only time that cost is being passed on to the students, if it was planned, it was in the syllabus, and it was clearly communicated to the student, this is going to be an additional cost for you to complete that course and to complete the grading requirement for the course. But those are the main tools that I'm aware of.
Terry, anything kind of related to Respondus or Proctoring Services in the context maybe of disability services and what faculty might need to know about that in the fall in terms of supporting students?
Jeff, I'm not hearing you. Was that question to me?
Yeah, we're just, I wonder if you could talk
I can hear
about.
Matt, can you repeat the question?
Can you hear me, Terry?
I can hear you, Rick.
So Jeff's question is, in terms of proctoring and utilization of Proctor U, what are some of the implications for that and for students who have a disability and need some other kind of proctoring? If you could address that.
So our testing services will be open and available for students. This past year we combined the testing that was separate, one in disability and then the other in the testing center, and we combined those under one umbrella. So students with disabilities, just as students who are doing makeup exams and other certifications, would go to the testing services office and schedule and take those things. And so we'll be up and running again in the fall and be able to offer that service for students.
And there's a question in the chat about syllabi extension for Respondus and Zoom. Not sure if that's a department specific question there or not.
I'm not sure exactly what that means, but I will tell you that for the syllabus, we are allowing faculty to not have to put all those different policies and various different details in their syllabus, and they can just link to a link that will go to a web page that have all that updated information. I don't know if that's what that's about, but if it's not, that's some extra information for everyone. If we can get some clarification in the chat, if it's not, that'd be great.
Yeah, there's the Syllabi Policies page got updated. Is that right, Rick? So that we can link to just put the single link in our syllabi now, and that covers all of the required university policies.
Correct.
Yeah, I think a lot of people appreciate that change.
Yeah, we've actually always had the ability to do that, but there's this urban legend that we couldn't, but that's not true.
That's great. Killing urban legends one town hall at a time. There's a question a little earlier. This is now jumping around a bit. Sorry about that. But there's a question about the PNP Clock Extension, whether that had been finalized.
Yeah, that has been finalized and been communicated to the faculty, and it's actually on the Academic Affairs website, but also on the COVID-19 site. Essentially, all faculty who are in the probationary period have had 1 year extension added to their probationary period. And you can opt out of that. So there may be faculty who are ready to go up this fall. So we certainly want to encourage them to do that if that's what they want to do. If not, then they're going to get 1 more year extension on their probationary period.
All right. I think we've answered most of the questions in the chat. I guess that's a sign that if somebody has an unanswered question, they better type one in quickly. I guess while we wait on any of those, we'll take a quick second here to talk about things that are coming up. Really appreciate Rick, you and Terry and President Golden for doing these town halls with us over the last several weeks. I think they've been a really good way for us to ask questions for faculty and staff. We are all in the process of transitioning those leadership roles. I'm happy to report that Alex Sternfeld Dunn, the director of the School of Music, is going to be the new Faculty Senate president. That starts here in a couple of days, but practically started a few days ago. And I know we'll soon be in some transitions in the UP and USS Senates as well. I don't know if Julie and Matt want to introduce those upcoming transitions.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Jeff. Beginning July 1, I'm excited to announce that Trish Gandu, the assistant director over in the Honors College, will take over as the UP Senate president. I think she's going to do a great job representing our about 1,200 staff here at the university.
And I'd like to say I will be replaced by Randy Sessions, who will be the new USS president for us. He works at the police station. And he has many, many years here on the university and has been in this role before, so we are covered in under good hands.
Thanks,
I'd like to thank you all for your service. You've been great to work with, and I know, especially during this challenging time, all the members of the executive team and the leadership on campus really does appreciate it. So I know you're going to miss us and miss these, but you'll probably get over it real soon. But no, I'm just kidding. We really do appreciate everything that you brought to us and all the questions, and I know you'll continue to do that.
Rick, I was thinking the exact same thing, that, the three of you have been such great, strong advocates, but yet such great colleagues in the process. And I think the university is a better place for the leadership of the three of you. So thank you all very much.
You bet. Hey, there's one last question, looks like in the chat box. So since we have a few more minutes, any update on research, about estimates about when in-person research can resume?
Yeah, so Dr. Colleen Pugh, who's Associate Vice President for Research, has been working on reopening plans in terms of research, and she actually communicated that information to the deans yesterday, who are now communicating that to faculty and students who are involved in research labs. But research, particularly critical research labs, have been open throughout this process, actually engaging and continuing to engage in the work that they have been planning all along with health and safety, social distancing in place. And that will continue as we go forward. And the same kind of policies will be in place. Each lab, each researcher has to complete a form that clearly articulates what their plans are and how they're going to utilize the health and safety guidelines that are expected of all of us, and that will be posted outside of each lab, so it's clear, particularly when the security issues for the police department and others need to be concerned about. So any further questions about that, or faculty are not clear on that, Colleen Pugh at wichita.edu would be happy to answer those questions.
All right, we are about out of questions out of the chat box, but I guess one final one we ought to ask is, as we meet here on Friday right before lunch, what's the future of Friday meetings on the campus going forward?
Well, I think that's one of the most awesome things, and we brought this up in our executive committee meeting on Monday from feedback from across campus that people are a little bit worn out, particularly worn out from Zoom meetings and meetings like this, and they need some time. And so we decided that the best way to do that, or one way, easy way we could do that, is to limit the number of meetings on Fridays so people could think about taking vacation days, 3-day weekends, or just getting caught up without having to worry about logging on to another meeting and not having time to really think about their jobs and be more strategic about what they're doing. So I was happy to see Dr. Golden put that out yesterday. Saw that was trending on social media. Now he did say that it starts in June, so we're not making that change today, obviously. But even my office, I told Laura in my office to clear off the calendar for meetings on Friday as much as possible. Now, I'm looking forward to it. I can't wait until that day, those days come around.
Yeah, we just need somebody to advocate for no meetings on Monday through Thursday. We'll be fine.
Yeah, so we'll work on that, Jeff.
Yeah. Matt, Julie, anything else?
No, I was really excited to see the president's announcement yesterday about no meeting Fridays, and I'm really hopeful that maybe we can even keep that as a practice at the university, even post-COVID as well.
Yeah, and I think the good thing would be is to wear your chocolate colors on Friday too, when we're not having those meetings.
I would like to give a big shout out to our facility services in the carpentry shop, the lock shop, and the warehouse. The carpentry shop has assembled all the sneeze guards. The lock shop has been delivering all the supplies, and the warehouse has been assembling the goodie boxes.
Yeah, and those all those are awesome. The sneeze guards look, in our office, they look like pieces of art. And thank you all for doing that. And let's give a shout out to the police department. They've been here through all this time, keeping the campus safe and keeping the students and people who are still on campus safe. So they haven't missed a beat.
Let's not forget that student health has been here all along, and so has our housing and residence life staff.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks to all the people who are doing all of that. All right. Well, thanks again, Rick and Terry, for taking time this morning to talk to all of us. We greatly appreciate the efforts you all have done to keep us informed.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, everybody, for all the hard work.
Everyone enjoy the 3-day weekend.
See you next week.
Bye.
Bye.